First off, if you haven't listened to part one of Sean's episode, start there. There are so many gems to uncover from Sean's vast experience in the photo industry, so don't miss out on that. For part two with Sean R. Bobby, we dive more into the dynamic world of working in e-comm studios, the importance of process documentation, and how integrating key tools streamlines pre- and post-production. As Sean has led and managed production for companies like Pottery Barn, Disney, and more, we get some key insights into leadership qualities you need to build creative teams for success. Settle in for this one. It's another great episode, and we're sure you'll love it. And so I'm curious, we're really talking about documentation and then what you just mentioned here. What have you found to be the most, effective ways for process documentation? Whether it be for a big studio or even, for maybe a retouching studio or maybe a retouching team. Are there any software or not workarounds, but like processes of documentation that you found have been very effective when bringing somebody in new? They know how to get acclimated, or if there's a new process you have to submit to a team, what do you find effective in an effective way of doing that?
So Peter, you tap into this question. To me applies to where we should be going in e-comm photo studios, which is, I think in the past 20 years, we've been working in e-comm 1.0, and we need to go to e-comm 2.0. We've all worked in spreadsheets way too much. Spreadsheets are not where I think organization of production should be, although it was a temporary solution. But we work in so many temporary solutions and piecemealing software and systems together that it creates way too many manual efforts, and that creates mistakes and more spend. Slower lead times, slower production times. So in that regard, I think that I've shared process documents and PDFs, but I believe that the next wave for companies, and some companies are beginning to put them in, is that it has to be integrated into your production process.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is there's some things that are starting to happen where, say, a retoucher gets a series of images, they do all the retouching, and then they go to upload them, and the software stops them and says, this background is wrong. Or the aspect ratio is wrong, or you saved the file format wrong, or whatever it may be, or there's no shadow here and a shadow is required. If we're going to apply AI into what we do, I think that is where we can gain some huge strides by doing that. But it's just starting to happen, I think. But whether we apply it or not is the key. So there is great, and I'm not a complete software tech guy. But I can understand implementing systems and how we can integrate together. You work with the experts that are doing it, and you tell them what you need to do it. But there have been technologies that have been around that not a lot of major studios were applying, that could simplify these types of process documents, that can help share them. And so and then it's lost in the chaos of daily digital production grind. So you're quick. Oh, we need 2 more retouchers because no one told us that all these shots had to be done last minute, because they could have been told 4 months ago. But now we bring them in and we pass off the work, and then we get it back and it's not right. And then we realize, hey, what process doc are they working on? Oh, wait a minute. They're not working on the one that we just updated a month ago. They're working on the 6-month-old one that we gave them a year ago, or whatever, a year ago we gave them, and they're working on that one. There's a lot of loss in that. And so I think you have to build it into your software and your system that you run. That would be the ideal approach. I'll give you one more idea and or solution. Or thought process. When it comes to products, the merchants often are running the businesses, or at least running the direction of the business with the products that they are purchasing and selling. They have all the details to each product. They have the specific names, specific colors, the material, the benefits, the features, and yet it's manually handed down through 3, 4, 5 teams. And I watched digital techs typing in a very complicated brand name that I won't mention that had 3 L's in it and were spelled very specifically and spelled 25 different ways. And it gets into the dam that way. And then people can't search for those images because they don't know the spelling of them. And it goes on and on. So the ideal and philosophical approach, but it sounds like a complicated system, but it's really not. You take their database, you take their information, you hope and you ask and you try to ensure that it is clean data and accurate data, and then you simply transfer it through the whole process to the end.
Yeah.
Through each department instead of having it all done manually and repeated. You save tons of time, you save lots of mistakes, and you create consistency, and you follow a process. You want to have naming conventions that are followed. Well, start them off that way, and then no one has to touch them through the process.
That's a huge thing I never understand is why naming conventions always get so confusing, like in terms of just being followed. Like,
because
start it off right and follow it.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's lost in, again, a new digital tech or even a digital tech that's never worked on a brand comes in and everybody's, getting some breakfast and the models are getting set up and you're rushing and he or she is looking at the shot list and however they either have to create the shot list or it's been created for them. They don't have any internal knowledge of a lot of details, and so things get lost.
Yeah.
So,
or they're asking like an art director or somebody who doesn't know, but is like, just name it this. And,
Great point. And that brings up an example. So when I was working with the studio, we had major color issues in post-production. So I began to try to solve that, and I realized color checker cards were not being used on set. So we began to apply them. They had been there, I guess, but then through changing people and institutional knowledge lost, those weren't being used. But then one art director I had talked to was trying to apply everything that we asked for on set for color consistency, which was great because that art director is dealing with children and outfits and so many things. And so they're also trying to help us, which is fantastic. But the information they were given to digital tech, because they weren't photo technically proficient, they're not supposed to be in that sense, was wrong. They were saying, "Hey, can you do it this way and do a color checker card every time?" And I when I finally figured out what was happening, I said, "No, wait a minute. Thank you so much for helping us, but here's what we need. We need them to do it this way." Mm-hmm. And so it's communication over and over and over again. But I think there is a 2.0 will eliminate some of those redundant sharing of information, and we'll just build them into systems, and hopefully robust systems that are built specifically around that company's digital production process. And then that way you deliver and the process documents are followed. When I had run that post-production department, I found out almost 4 or 5 months later that we were delivering images that weren't in the proper backgrounds because we had not been provided that information in a process doc. And I asked the web team, what have you guys been doing with them? And they said, we've been fixing them on our end. And I just went, oh my gosh, that's not what you guys should be doing. You should be getting them from us correctly. And no one had addressed it. They just were in the approach of, the team before me never listens to me. I'm just going to fix the mistakes, and it shouldn't be about that. You should own it. So, it's
even the mention of, trying to streamline, even just taking user error out of the conversation would be a huge step.
It really would.
And it makes me think of Adrian over at Creative Q. I was just talking with him, and they're trying to build a solution similar to that. We're on the front end, everything's organized in kind of a production deck, and you can pull your file naming from that and your shot lists from that, and it kind of stays consistent through the whole entire production process, and everybody can have access to it. So everybody has one source of truth. So if you need the information for something like that, it's there. Things like that, I feel are hopefully, will get more deeply integrated into certain major workflows like Capture One or stuff like that. Like being able to facilitate some of that stuff through Capture One would be amazing, especially for
Agreed.
and
In Photoshop as well. And I am seeing some modules being used in Photoshop for those things. But that is how you end up saving on so many errors that create so many problems throughout the whole process. And you can also do it through living docs online that as soon as they get changed, they're sent out and updated to everyone in a distro.
Yeah.
And that way you're not, we have to evolve. We have to evolve as leaders, as people, as in our work, and we have to have our processes evolve. And we go from spreadsheets to maybe something like Airtable to maybe something that is integrated in. And then when you begin to have documents that team members are receive or are required every time they're updated, now they're not using previous ones. You have to think that whole process out. Like, how can I ensure that they're using the latest one? Is it a date? Is it just having a doc that is a master doc that says, guys, the master doc is always updated? But every department has stuff everywhere in servers, in Google Docs.
I know.
It really, one, it's a security issue. So I'm sure, a lot of business leaders would not like, that happening. But two, it's just a convoluted mess, and it needs to be pulled together. And because departments do work differently, and there's a lot going on, you have to have a deep connection to your MarTech team to ensure that flow just as much as kind of flow. You use that with your links with your strategic partners. So that's and we haven't got, I don't know if we've got there yet. I haven't seen it yet. I mean, some studios are doing it better than others, but we haven't seen. It's only if it's really tightly controlled and managed. I also had written down a note, and one of them was, there was a company that was beginning to implement what they called a mission control team, which I thought was great. It didn't ever really take off, but I don't know why, because I wasn't in managing or overseeing that team. But it's about a company having a team that goes from the start to the finish of supply chain, from merchants to brand and marketing, to the photo studio, or to creative visual content, all the way through, and saying, where's the disconnect? What is your disconnect? What is your disconnect? That is critical, because there's so much lost in frantic flow of, we got to keep it nimble, and we have to pull out products that are selling right now. And we've just seen, last week, this product just went up by 10%. So we have to now sell the new colors of it. And so much is happening that when you have those disconnects, they create huge problems. I remember we had to quickly shoot a suit that hadn't been shot because it had been purchased so much and had never been put on the site, and it had, now they had so much inventory on it that it needed to sell quickly. And there's so many little problems and big problems that can occur. So that connection is important. I also remember talking to a merchant once, and they said, Sean, how much of the spring collection that we've purchased have you shot in the studio? Now, as a studio leader, I should have a very specific number. And I said, I can't tell you that. And he said, why can't you tell me that? I said, because you don't provide me that information. And so if I don't know what you've purchased, how much you've purchased of it, all the different SKUs you've purchased, how can I tell you, how do I know that we have actually completed, or how close we are to completing a spring collection or a fall collection? So information has to be shared throughout, and there has to be a team that can ask each department, what are you getting and not getting from your next team that you need? Because we're also immersed in our work, And in our
Oh,
deadlines and
totally.
in our demands, we can rarely get to it. But that is
Right.
what is the job of a leader. And so if you can never get to it, you can never solve those problems. And then maybe you're not doing the job that they wanted you to
Well,
do. So,
yeah.
yeah.
On some of those points, I'm curious, amongst teams like this, as a retoucher myself, we deal a lot with, getting feedback from creatives. We're collaborating with them, or, knowing what they want done to an image.
Yeah.
In a process like e-comm, where it can be very more of like a technical retouching, we call it, where it's like you have a
Exactly.
process, put it on white, strip it down, shadow, stuff like that. But, there's still cleanup here at certain times. There's some more involved e-comm shots, or if maybe there's a hard garment or something you couldn't get wrinkles out or something.
Yeah.
When there is some of that subjectivity that has to be placed into something, and maybe there needs to be conversations with art directors and stuff. And what do you feel? At VeryBusy, we're building a solution that we think fits best for something like this, but there's other circumstances, like especially if you're on an internal studio and you have your art director there on set, maybe your retouchers are on set. How do you like to have that communication between perhaps a retoucher, the post-production team, and then maybe the creative side of the project? And I think there's also that side subject too, where, is the photographer part of that after he shoots it, or is he not part of that? Is there too many cooks in the kitchen sometime?
Yeah.
What's your experience with trying to streamline that process?
I think the first part of that is to look toward business directives. Our opinions, for lack of, not to sound rude, don't really matter if it doesn't match up to the business directors, because
Well
whether we
said.
agree with a leader or a CEO or not, um, they're running the business and they have a goal toward how our products are supposed to sell, and we need to align with that. But then there are also very technical aspects of how we need to achieve that. And we also have as you were asking a question, the major challenge I'm thinking about is the art directors are overworked, the creative directors are
Yeah.
creatives are overworked, creative leads. They're all overworked to where it's why you have to have all of this process documentation and information shared in a central place that everyone can go to and utilize, because it's become so hard to know if you're adding work to someone
Right.
that
Yeah.
so that's a challenge. And then I think another critical part of it is, so running post production for a company. This brand was very color centric, tons of color, because it matched what their demographic was or what they were selling. And my retoucher said, Sean, we have to path all of these products out in the e-com shots because they are casting colors onto the other products. This pink pillow is casting, its pinkness,
Yeah.
its color, its cast onto a blue blanket, and vice versa. And so some things cannot be achieved on set. And so I think it's, again, part of my process of asking questions. And so that retoucher had a great idea. And by outsourcing and pathing it out, we could then address the color specifically and match it up better. And the art director or the photographer couldn't control it on set. But
Yeah.
then there were other times when they could, and I would go and say, guys, why are these curtains being not lit evenly?
Yeah.
Why aren't you feathering the light and then matching up, your meter to? And they know this already. I wouldn't say this to them, but for other people out there that may not know, you take a meter reading on all sides, and you get within a tenth of a stop, and then those curtains should be evenly lit. And by doing so, when you evenly light them and they have a proper exposure on them, the color is the same. But if the
Exactly.
color is off by a stop, a orange curtain can go to an amber looking curtain on
Yeah.
the right side, and then it could cause customer experience issues and returns.
Yeah.
And
Returns and
so it escalates. And so, and they said, Sean, take a look. And I looked at the surroundings of their set. We had walls that were painted cream. You're like, so wait a minute, that's a color cast that shouldn't be happening. Either the walls should be white, or black, but honestly, the wall should be 18% gray. That's the best
Straight up.
solution. And then I said, so why aren't you feathering the light for better control of the exposure? And they said, we can't because we're working in such a small set. We are we'll contaminate the next set over by tilting our light. So they were stuck in the parameters that they were shooting.
Yeah.
I wasn't running the studio, so I would have fixed that. For that, I would have tried to address it at least if I could with space and control. But then you realize, oh, they can't fix it. We got to fix it in post. So you begin to pick off each different problem. Here's another problem, Peter. I hope I'm answering your question too. But
keep going. This is great.
So when I first came into one of the studios that I was working with, they had a major issue with color on set. And I watched a photographer was gelling one of the lights with a, they were getting a red shift, so they were gelling it with a blue gel of some kind. And we were trying to figure out what was going on, and we couldn't figure it out that day. And so over a period of time, I began to realize what was happening. And I realized, I think the digital tech with the Capture One white balance tool might be picking up the actual pixels on the image sensor, which are, blue, red, green. And so they might be picking that up. And because they were using, it was a number of years ago, and they were using a Mark II, and that was a 22 megapixel camera. Mm-hmm. And so you zoom in too much, you're going to get pixels. And then we luckily in the studio had a Capture One beta tester, and he wasn't shooting these fashion stuff. He was doing still stuff, and I was sharing the problem with him on a break, and he knew exactly what the problem was. He said, "Oh, Sean, did you know the Capture One white balance tool is a 1% tool?" I said, "I didn't know that." He goes, "Yeah, if you zoom in." Oh, here's the problem we figured out, Peter. We had taken a gray card on a color checker card.
Yeah.
And we had measured it on the same gray area, and we got a shift up to 1,000 different Kelvin temperatures on the same gray card.
Yeah.
That was when I figured out that I thought it might be the pixels, because you're looking at the same gray card in the same light, and it was like click, 5,000 degrees Kelvin, click in the same area, 6,000 degrees. What? And so it was the 1% white balance tool of Capture One.
Oh man.
And because I wasn't doing it and being the digital tech guy, or man or woman, I wasn't aware of that because I wasn't actually working that shoot. Yeah. And he said the solution is don't zoom in past 50%. If you zoom in past 50%, that white balance tool is going to pick up a very specific pixel.
Yeah, it's going to go in.
And so that was the solution. So then the process doc changed for every digital tech and said, when it comes to measuring white balance on set, as soon as you do this, do not go past 50% with your white balance tool because of this. And
that's good to know.
Yeah. It was great. And it wasn't but I had an idea of what it was happening, but the Capture One beta tester photographer, he knew. Right. And I thought, I wish I would have asked him 2 months ago. But we solved the problem, and that was what was happening. And then we were able to build more consistency from it. And so there was another problem once, too, that I had, and I shared this story in other talks. And it was a small problem that when I was beginning to work with the set. Very small problem, but I was curious to understand why. I can't remember what the problem is off the top of my head. And I was having an all-teams meeting. 2 people that were there that had been there 10 years that opened the studio said in front of everyone, "Sean, why are you focused on this one little tiny problem? It's not a big deal. And you're making it too big of a deal." And for a split second, I almost acquiesced and thought, oh, okay, they seem to know. But I stopped myself, and I inside I said, no, this is my process. I have to figure out if you can give me a reason. So that was another thing. If you don't have a good reason for why you're asking a team to do something a certain way, you lose trust, you lose respect, you lose confidence, and it's not a great approach. And so asking their opinions, but also delving in is critical. And so I stopped and said, well, this is my process. I'm if you can tell me why it's happening, I want to know, and I believe it's whether it's small or large. I want to figure out the problems. Peter, within a year or so, that problem was so tiny led to a massive issue that we were having. A massive issue
There you
that
go.
affected
Tip of the
the whole
iceberg.
budget, affected the whole studio. And so you what you realize, I'm not saying like, oh, look, Peter, I was right and everybody else was wrong. No, I mean, these two people disagreed with me, but um, my point is that you go with your gut. You have a
Yeah.
process, and you recognize that if you trust it, if it's worked before, if that formula continues to work, then if it's not broken, why try to fix it? And and so it led to a massive issue, uh, sweeping from
Yeah.
start to finish on how we photographed our products. And that told me that I need to stick to my gut feelings, my experience, my knowledge, and a
Yeah.
formula. So
Right.
the other formula about managing people. So it reminded me of how I take my formula for managing people. So, and I have formulas for how we shoot. And again, it evolves and changes as it should. But for managing people and believing in servant leadership, I people would say, "Oh, he's too nice. He's going to be walked on. People are going to walk all over him and take advantage of him. He's such a nice guy." I really hope they say that at least. I'm a nice guy because I think I want to be that person in general in life. But and I would think inside, you don't know me. This is not my approach is to get everybody to like me. I want to be a nice person because it's proper, and it's moral and it's ethical and it's good in life. But my management style is care about the people, find out what they're struggling with and what their challenges are, whether it's equipment, training, process, timelines, whatever it is. Make sure that they have the training, make sure that they have the tools and the information, and that you care, so that when something goes wrong or when a person is not achieving their goals, you can have the hard conversation because you can say, you know me, I care about how successful you are here. You've been given all the tools, you've been given all the training, you've been given all the time to adjust or whatever it may be, but it's not happening. Why is it not happening?
Yeah.
And so when you do that, you provide, you give dignity to people, but then they're willing to say that there's a less combative issue. They can sometimes look more internally. It's really hard to get
Well,
criticism.
yeah, you can't really make excuses if you've been offered all the opportunities.
That's
Right.
again, I put it in a huge paragraph and you say it in 5 words, which is perfect. If you've been given the opportunity, you can't say that you weren't provided that potential success. And so when those formulas work, people feel like they're treated like adults. You're not speaking down to them, and that you care. And then managing people becomes a fairly easier process.
Yeah.
I won't say easy, but easier because there's a formula on how for my approach. And it's not just to say do this, and you better output 10 more shots a day, or it's just not an
Rule
approach.
with an iron fist. No.
Yeah, and I've seen it, and it's brutal, and it's rough, and it's rarely successful, in my opinion.
It doesn't. It usually affects more than just that person. It spreads like wildfire.
It really does. I have watched toxic leaders come onto set, and pretty much everyone put their heads down and not say a word because they're too afraid to speak up because they're worried about being called out by a leader that may be great at what they do in their role, but they may not understand the very detailed technical aspects of why a DT can't match color at that point, or why the clothing isn't hanging right, or whatever might be happening, or the model is struggling to give them the look they need. So if you don't have this open dialogue of people working together and stepping up and stepping back and wanting everybody wanting the other person to be successful, you need that in a creative field.
Yeah.
It's vital. So
No, totally.
Yeah.
Before we get too far from it, we kind of sort of delved into a topic of color.
Okay.
And this is one I want to bring up because I think it's a question I hear often, and especially in the post production side of things. And when working with huge processes, with teams, like you said, from set to post to if it's going to the dam, it's going to go to delivery, wherever. Between digital and print these days, we have the option of you go to digital where we can spend all day getting accurate color, but then people are going to be looking at it on their phones with God knows what color is going to be then. And then you have print, of course, where, you can be heavily monitored and, calibrated and, you can try to get the best prints depending on where you're going to with. And nowadays, we see a lot of, projects that are going to be going to both print and digital and trying to decide, what's the best. So like people, you'll be shooting e-comm product that might be used as elements in a KV image printed in store or something like that.
Yeah.
How have you seen color throughout the years, the process of color management change, but also nowadays, when you're working with teams, how, what do you advise or what's your kind of take on, whether it's more of a digital shoot or more print shoot, or maybe it's both. What solutions do you like to offer up or see a team take?
So I remember having a conversation with one of our marketing leaders who was over the studio, and it was the first conversation. And when they asked me to introduce myself, I said, I'm not the post-production manager. I'm not doing my job to match color. I'm here because I am here to improve customer experience. I'm here to increase sales. I'm here to reduce returns and help merchants make better sales, help the company make better sales, and create consistency for final customer experience. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
And color is only, so I believe the base of true matching color is through numbers, because numbers don't lie. That's it. That is the biggest part of where to start. That being said, color is very subjective. And as much as you can show leadership, are these two colors different tones? Yes, they are. No, they're not. Cover one of them up, or let me click on both. They actually look exactly the same. It's the lighting that makes one side look brighter than the other. It's that old, gold dress or blue dress online meme, or it's color can fool people. Our eyes can really trick. So that's why I believe numbers are where you start, whether it's with color profiling and final usage. But we all know that when we take a raw file or a PSD and we scrunch it down into a JPEG, and it goes from a Pro RGB or Adobe RGB down to sRGB, and it's destroyed it changes. And so another conversation I had once with a creative director was about color, and they told me they didn't care about color. And I said, and they said exactly what you mentioned earlier, which was the final user looks at it in all kinds of different screens, so I don't care about really consistent color. That being said, it wasn't their job or their responsibility, but maybe they didn't mean it in that way, but that was what was said. And I thought to myself and said, well, and I said, my response was, I have to care about color, because the merchants, let's say, for example, a merchant has bought 10 different gray suits and tweed and silk or whatever the case is. I'm not a merchant, all the different materials. They are going to want those 12 gray suits to all look different, as equally different as they look live than they look online. There has to be that consistency. Now, whether the end user looks at it on a monitor that's not dialed in properly, or a phone, or whatever the case is, you're right. That is something you can't control. But again, as my wife always says, control what you can control. Yeah. And this applies to that. And so it has to leave the studio and the post-production, if they're under the studio, it has to leave in the most accurate possible way. How it gets crunched or destroyed after that is Part of it is out of your control, like the end user. Part of it is within your control. If the dam is under the studio, then you have to find out how are they outputting and what are they using to output. Um, I had conversations with the web team. We call them some those teams are called digital production as well, or web, but the web team basically. Um, you're crunching the image for speed so bad that you're destroying the color
Yeah,
and you're
it's small
destroying
now.
things, or you're applying a filter in Adobe Experience Manager, whatever it may be, whatever CRM you're using, um, that is affecting this. And if you have to do that, let's figure out how you're affecting it and make adjustments and deliver everything that way so it's as consistent on the back end. So you have to tie these parts together. You tie industry standards together, you build a base from numbers, you get everyone to buy into the process because hopefully they agree with you, and you
Buying in,
you
yep.
you include them in the solutions. If you're not including your retouch manager and your retouchers and your DTs in color solution, then
Well,
you're not possibly going to get buy-in. But when they
that's an
believe
issue.
in what you believe in, they buy in, and then you don't have to worry about uh, consistency issues.
Yeah.
So, and then it has to be addressed as it goes down the line. And there, however you do it, you have to be consistent. And I don't see that, unfortunately.
There
You'll
is a lot
see
of,
images that are pulled from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that are sent to print that were never shot that way, were not adjusted. And then the printers are actually making their own adjustments to try to match off of my notes, on the proofs, and that is such an extra amount of work that you're going through. Um, you're going through rounds of, we need more yellow here. Can you add 3 points of magenta here?
yeah.
It would be so much easier if you just had consistency and you built from that. The other thing I'll add for the uh, phrase that talks about the end user, my belief was monitors and color is getting more consistent and better each
It's
year.
getting better.
If you don't address it right now, your mistakes and your inconsistencies are going to show up a lot stronger later on.
Oh, yeah.
And
I agree with
you
that.
you and I know that 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago or 15 years ago, those monitors have vastly improved. And those phones have vastly improved.
Yeah.
I mean, an iPhone 4 to an iPhone
Phones are getting
15,
pretty, yeah.
the color looks, or a Samsung or Google Pixel, the color looks much, much better and there's a lot of, it's almost like they've taken out the user messing up the adjustments of the monitor because the default preset looks so good. You don't have to
It
make,
does look good. I think now they just have like night mode or something where everything gets warm or something like
yes,
that. But
yeah.
I think they're for the most part looking decent. I think it is interesting when it does come down. I don't know the specifics, but I know that for a lot of retailers, color is one of from what they saw online or maybe in print, not being accurate and getting the sample or getting their merchandise and not liking the color and
Uh-huh.
returning it. It's a big reason for returns is color.
It's one of the number one reasons
Yeah.
for product returns. Yeah.
And the amount of time as from my end, as a retoucher, the amount of time we spend on color is pretty significant with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And but in terms of the process, things can get mixed up. So like you were saying, having something consistent, having that, having something documented like that pathway that people can follow. Because I think, like a lot of the times, people can be doing the correct thing for their specific role, but it not be the correct thing for the whole entire process, right?
Exactly right.
And that's where some
Exactly
of
right.
these things were going wrong, it seems like.
And creatives grab images off of the dam and then make adjustments and send them without the studio, and
They're
then you start
screenshotting it and they're cropping it and then they're sending
exactly.
it.
So you have a lot of things that are out of your control with that. The other problem I would see and I still see these days with different studios, is that the merchants are providing, one, they're not providing enough samples. So teams are not fighting literally, but they're jostling over, I need that
Yeah.
sample right now, and I need
Here,
that
go over
sample.
here. Oh,
And
we
so
experience that a lot.
you're saving $50 or $100,000 or whatever it is. I don't know how much samples cost and how many, depending on how many SKUs. But you're saving this much amount of money to spend 10 times that amount of money in teams, in payroll and in lead times that are extending because I don't have. I get people come to me and they would say, "Hey, Sean, why haven't you guys delivered these assets?" I go, "We can deliver them without checking color, but we have not received the product. It was shot 3 weeks ago. Where is the sample? I don't know where the sample is because we don't have a tracking system at this studio. So I don't know where the sample went, but it didn't come to post production." And so the other one is I've also seen in companies they provide a sample, but it is the first sample, and the number 2 or the number 3 slightly changes in color. Or changes the color's name. What used to be called cobalt blue is now called metal blue. And if you don't know that, then you're lost. And so that you're on a need to know basis of what information you receive, I don't believe in. Give me all the information happening and build a database that as soon as your cobalt blue changes to metal blue, it shows the adjustment. So if you type in cobalt, you get, hey, the new name is metal. Like there are so many. We have so much technology we're not applying to this process. But when you get the asset you shot was with the first sample, and when you deliver it, they've gone to a 3rd or 4th generation. And when they say color doesn't match up, no one remembers. What's that?
I was just saying, like changing buttons or changing fabric. You've seen a lot of that.
And then there's never a process that says it wasn't post-production fault. It was merchants were fat. They had to work fast, and they were designing the product through the production season, and the studio got the wrong color product. And so can you make no? It's just post-production got color wrong. Fix it.
Yeah,
and,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So those are things that you can't fix. You just have to then adjust and deal with them at the end of the season before the launch and say, okay, which products adjusted. And the other huge challenge we have, Peter, is lighting for color. You take an e-comm shot on white to a small environment, then to a large environment that's supposed to be a little bit more moody. Color changes dramatically. So you want to get within the color family, but you're not going to match up a maroon pillow that looks maroon on white, but then is in a shaded area of a whole set. It is not going to be that exact moon. It's maroon, but as long as it looks maroon and it's in that maroon family, that's all that you can do. I think you have to apply the numbers technically, and then you have to have consistency throughout color space. I watched studios using different color spaces, and it's like, no, let's all get master images of color space. Then you can change it down the line. But let's all start. What are we going to agree to? Adobe RGB. Everybody works in that. You all deliver it to the DAM. Let the DAM crunch it to sRGB, and it will change. But at least it'll change consistently, and then we can make adjustments from those changes. So,
well, over the it's almost been 2 hours now, but I see this consistency in your ethos over setting down a process and making sure everybody's up to date and understanding their needs to meet that process. Whether it be post-production workflow, overall production workflow, bringing on new talents, working with new people, being set up for success is kind of the key here, and being proactive in terms of trying to be successful in what you're trying to accomplish, with the end goal being, what are we selling and what's the purpose of it,
Yes.
We covered a lot, and we're wrapping up. We're almost coming up on 2 hours here. And I want to get to I want to pull out a little bit. I want to kind of do some ending notes with you, kind of some final notes with you. One thing I'm always interested in is, if you weren't in this industry, if you weren't in the photo industry, you didn't go to Brooks, or, you didn't follow this path, what do you think you'd be doing in life right now?
Oh, gosh. I'm glad I focused on one type of medium. Photography is my, overall reaching efforts. But I'm glad I did that, because I'm probably similar to my mom, where I find astronomy amazing. I find
Yeah.
acting amazing. I find painting, and I find, and also I love the challenges of business, and I might have been
Yeah.
all over the place. And so, what would I be doing? I'm not sure, but maybe in travel as well. One thing I know and I've learned about myself over time is that I'm a people person, and so whatever I jumped into, I would be applying that. I hope I do it in a good way. I am, again, I've spoken a lot on this podcast, but on this presentation, but I try to be a good listener. I want to become a better listener, and so as far as what field I would be working in, I mean, film is very similar to photography, so maybe it's not a good answer. I love film. I love being on movie sets and work with large teams like that. But and again, I love things like astronomy. It's hard to say, but I know that my passion was and is photography and is visual content and visual arts. And there's a one of the things I've been working or studying is longevity and the whole blue zones around the world and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
philosophical approach around how people live. Why are some areas where we have a much more abundance of people living to
That
100?
is fascinating.
It is, and it's diet and exercise, and it's also community. But there's a term that the Japanese use. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but it's called ikigai. I don't know if you've heard that term,
Okay, I
ikigai.
haven't. No.
There's a book on it, IKIGIA or something like that, ikigai, and it's a Japanese term for what is your purpose. I may be getting this wrong, but basically, what do you do every day that you would love to do that you can't stop yourself from doing because you enjoy it so much? Whether it's retouching, whether it's investing in stocks, whether it's skincare, photography, whatever it is, cooking. You do something that you can't stop yourself from doing, and I can't stop myself from being involved in photography. I love looking at beautiful images. I love studying images, even if they're a ring on a white background with a reflection,
Yeah.
or a beautiful photojournalistic shot. Um, I torture my wife on walks because I take pictures of everything, and it's just something I can't stop myself from doing. And so this is my ikigai,
Well, you
and
ended up in the right place then, right?
oh, I hope
You made the
so.
right choice.
I love it, and I love the career. But now, as I get older, I love if somebody wants mentoring, I love being able to share anything with them. And this is why I love doing this too, because if it helps any person with their own personal journey,
Hmm.
that's a great joy as well. We all want that, I think, as artists as we're coming up. So,
Well, you
yeah.
have a wealth of knowledge to share, which you have today. Which
Thanks.
I guess the next good question for you is, if for somebody, or maybe looking back on yourself, back on your teenage self, is there one piece of advice you would give to somebody looking to get into this industry right now?
Um, One piece of advice I would say, be yourself.
Be
I
yourself.
think that was it Steve Jobs or somebody had a quote that said, "Be yourself. No one can be as good as who you are as
Yeah.
yourself," basically. And when I was early in my photography career, people would say because they only knew one photographer, Ansel Adams. So if they saw your work, they go, "Oh, do you want to be the next Ansel Adams?" And I never understood that. I never understood how to answer it. Then one day it clicked, and I realized, oh, I never wanted to be the next Ansel Adams. Not that I don't admire him, but because I knew I wanted to be the next Sean R. Bobby. That's
There
really
you go.
the only person I can be.
Yeah.
And your uniqueness and your talents and your creativity and who you are comes from who you are. You can't be anybody different. You can improve on that. You can address your weaknesses. You can evolve. But
Hmm.
I would say be yourself. Recognize things you have to improve. Be willing to say, I'm sorry, or I made the mistake. That was me. And I would recommend that because at the end of the day, you will sleep with yourself better and you will be happier as a person. So,
I like it. Now, probably the most important question here. Are you a Mac or a PC user?
oh, I am a Mac user.
Dun, dun, dun.
I've used Mac since way back in the day. I won't say the year because it'll date me. Well, my hair is dating me, I guess. Uh, but yeah, I've been a Mac user forever. But I'll say this, and I'm a Nikon user as well. But we used Canons in all the studios. Uh, Mac or PC to me doesn't matter. Nikon or Canon doesn't matter. It's how you use the tool and what works best for you. Obviously, I think our world is
Totally.
built around Mac. Yeah. I think I'm glad Mac stayed around when it started to have its challenges in the 90s, and it didn't go away because it brought so much of user friendly
Yeah.
interfaces and all
Interface.
that. And so, but I'm a Mac user, yeah, and I am a Mac nerd as well, for sure.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining me today. Where can, people listening, where can they contact you, get in touch with you? Socials, LinkedIn, where
Yeah.
can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people there. Just pull up my name if you'll have it in my name. My last name is Arbabi. It's 6 letters, but it's often misspelled. And Sean is Sean. But if you have it to link to that, then I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I have my own site, which is just my name, seanarbabi.com. It's a mix of some of my photography, although I don't shoot commercially. And then it shows some of the digital production. And there's a blog there that I repost some of my posts on LinkedIn. So you can find me there as well. I think those are the best places to find me, are on LinkedIn, or my site, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You unloaded a lot of good stuff.
Thank
which,
you. I hope I didn't step on your
listen back
words.
and digest.
Yeah. I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure. I love working with you, Peter. It's wonderful to talk to like-minded folks. And thanks for everyone for listening and staying around for this long.
Oh, of course. And for those listening, Sean's written a couple of blog posts for us. He's got some more coming up that we're releasing. So stay tuned on the blog to see what more he has to say.
All right. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you all for listening. See y'all later. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're tired of juggling a million things and want to take your retouching workflow to the next level, head over to verybusy.io and start your 30-day free trial. No strings attached, no credit card needed, just pure productivity. Link in the description box. If you like what you heard today, do us a solid, subscribe and leave us a rating. This will help us reach more creatives just like you. And I'll catch you next time on the Wrap Party podcast powered by verybusy.io.